I'm Ariel,
And Michelle,
and
and
we're the
we're the
Board
board
Game
game
Tutors.
tutors.
We're going to be teaching you today advanced concepts, going over one of the first factions in the Summoner Wars Master Set, called the Mountain Vargath, with their summoner Sunderved. So let's go ahead and get started.
All right.
So as you can see here, this board is not the same board we used in our Just the Basics video. Um, this board, it's a neoprene mat. It's from the Summoner Wars Alliances set. Um, The only reason we chose it is because, as you can see, it has a lot less glare compared to the previous board that we were using, which came from the Summoner Wars Master set. So we'll be using this one for the time being, just so glare isn't so much of a problem. All right, so on the Mountain Vargath faction, you can see here, this is the starting setup card. Uh, Basically, on the one side, it tells you where to set up your units. And on the other side, it tells you your event cards and has a turn phase summary like we went over last time. So not too much to note on that card. Next, we have a wall. These are Sunderved's wall cards. Not too special. They're different coloration compared to other factions. Some have different colors, and that's all that really matters. Okay, so now where we actually get to reading the text on each of the individual cards. This one first is a warrior, and that's a common. So the commons, those are the more obviously common cards that you have in your deck. They're your soldiers that are essentially the equivalent of pawns. And this warrior, he rolls one die. He costs one magic if you want to summon him. He's a melee fighter, and he has 2 hit points until he dies. His special ability here is Battle Frenzy. When attacking a common unit with this warrior, if this warrior is on your opponent's side of the battlefield, add 1 to the warrior's attack value during that attack. So, for example, if my warrior, this obviously right here is my side of the board, if my warrior ever crossed the midline of the board, he would get 1 more die. So instead of rolling 1 die, he would roll 2 dice. So basically, his special ability means you can add 1 dice to his roll, 1 die to his roll, if he's on the other side of the board. Right? So that's a common, and that's the first common that we've seen. The second common that I want to talk about is the Rusher. He's pretty much identical statistics. 1 die roll when he attacks, 1 magic to summon him. He's a melee fighter, and means he can only attack adjacent people. And 2 health. His special ability is Rush. When moving with this Rusher during your movement phase, if this Rusher begins its movement on your side of the battlefield, you may move it up to 2 additional spaces. So, for example, if this Rusher was on my side of the board, so even up to this point here or anywhere on that line, um, it could move 2 additional spaces to the 2 spaces that he can normally move. So this Rusher could theoretically move 1 space, 2 spaces, 3 spaces, 4 spaces. So Rushers are pretty critical in terms of getting to the other side of the opponent's board and getting in the face of their summoner. All right, the next and the last common of the Mountain Vargath is the Brute. And his statistics are a little bit different. He rolls 1 die, same as the others. He costs 2 magic to summon. He's a melee fighter, and he has 3 hit points, so he's a little bit sturdier. His special ability is Knock Around. After wounding a unit with an attack from this Brute, if that unit is not destroyed, you may move it up to 3 clear straight line spaces. So, what does that mean? So, let's say, for example, this Brute was here on the board, and just for illustrative purposes, let's say he was fighting the warrior. So, the Brute rolls 1 die, and so I roll the die. Okay, that didn't count. I'll do it again. Okay, I rolled a 6 here. So that would be 1 wound on this warrior. As you can tell on the warrior, he has 2 hit points, so I would, at this point, put 1 wound on him. But because I have the knockaround ability with this Brute, after I wound another unit with an attack from this Brute, If that unit is not destroyed, you may move it up to three clear straight line spaces. So theoretically, if I wanted to, I could push this unit back 1, 2, 3 spaces. Or if I wanted to, I could do 1, 2, 3 spaces. Basically, his ability is useful in terms of, well, you have to roll a successful die result. As you can see, if you don't roll successfully, you can't do knock around. But when you do roll a successful die result, 3, 4, 5, or 6, then you can push your enemy around as long as they're not already dead. If they only have 1 hit point, they're just dead straight out. Okay? Now, I didn't start with a summoner initially, but the summoner for the Mountain Vargath is Sunderved. He rolls 3 dice. He doesn't have a summon cost because he's a summoner. He's already out in the field. He is a melee fighter. He can only attack people adjacent to him, and he has 7 hit points. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And his special ability, the purpose for not showing you the summoner initially was because his special ability is command. When you attack with a common Mountain Vargath unit you control that is within 2 spaces of Sunderved, add 1 to that unit's attack value during the attack. So let's back up a little bit. Let's say, for example, Sunderved was right here, and he had one of his common soldier units here, one of his common soldier units here, and he had the other one here. So the sentence, the structure of the sentence here where it says within 2 spaces of Sunderved, technically all of these units would be within 2 spaces of Sunderved, because you just have to count how many spaces away the unit is. So he would go 1, 2 spaces, so that rusher is within range of his command ability. This brute, you would go 1, 2, or 1, 2, and so he's still within 2 spaces of Sunderved. And this warrior, he's just 1 space away. So Sunderved's command ability here is really helpful in terms of getting his common units, only the commons, rushers, brutes, and warriors, 1 extra die. So instead of rolling 1 die, this warrior would roll 2, and so would that brute, and so would that rusher. So Sunderved's ability can really be useful in terms of making a really strong offensive against your enemy summoner. Right, let's push these cards to the side. Now we're going to talk about champions. Champions are the stronger units in your army. They're hardier and usually can roll more dice than your common units. So this is Torridon. He's a champion. He rolls 2 dice normally without the help of Sunderved. And that's another important fact to note about Sunderved. He only affects common units. So all 3 champion units that you have in your army, they are not affected by Sunderved's command ability. So, talking about Torridon, he costs 6 magic. He's a melee fighter. He can only attack people adjacent to him. And he has 7 hit points, kind of like Sunderved. But his special ability is called Trample. This is a really unique special ability because Torridon may move through common units. Only commons, not champions. Every unit that Torridon moves through receives 1 wound marker. Torridon must end his move on an unoccupied space. So, for example, Torridon can move 2 spaces legally, just like anyone else. So, like I said here, he can move through commons, not summoners, and not champions. So let's say, for example, this rusher was here. Torridon could trample for his movement. He could go on top of this rusher and then pass the rusher onto another space. However, if this warrior was here, Torridon could not go 1 space, 2 spaces, because he's only allowed to move 2 spaces normally. And so that would not be a legal move because this card says Torridon must end his move on an unoccupied space. So the only legal move you could do would be here and here, or here and here. So that's Torridon's special trample ability. Next we're going to talk about Groudon. He is a champion. He rolls 3 dice. He costs 6 magic. He is a melee fighter, and he has 6 hit points. So Sunderhammer At the end of your turn, you may choose a wall that is adjacent to Groudon. Add 2 wound markers to the chosen wall card. So, say for example, how would this card be useful? Well, let's say you had an enemy wall right here, and perhaps you had an enemy unit right here. This is just one example of how this card could be useful. His special ability could be useful. Let's say Groudon rolls 3 attack dice against this unit. And let's just see what happened if we rolled. He rolled 2 successful hits and 1 unsuccessful. So that rusher would be dead, and then that rusher would go to my magic pile. And Groudon could then use his special ability to add 2 wounds to this wall. So as you can see there, he can be versatile in terms of he can attack and also get 2 guaranteed hits against a wall. That's an enemy wall. Obviously, you wouldn't really want to do that to your own wall unless there were some special circumstances involved.
And this card does note that you may choose a wall that is adjacent to Groudon. So that's an optional ability. And whenever it says may on any of these cards, you get to choose. So if you're next to your own wall, for example, you would most likely choose not to place wounds on it.
Right. Also, another thing to point out, this brute, he also says may in his wording. So you don't have to move a unit 3 spaces away. It's just a tactical choice as to whether or not you want to move that unit. Okay. Let's see here. Now we're going to talk about Quen. So this is the last champion of the Mountain Vargath. She rolls 2 dice. She costs 5 magic, and big surprise here, she's ranged. So as you could tell from the previous cards that I discussed, almost all of the Mountain Vargath are not ranged fighters. So Quen can actually attack people that are up to 3 spaces away. So, and she only has 4 hit points. So, she can die relatively quickly because she doesn't have that many hits to take before she is out of the game. And her special ability here is Chain Lightning. Once per turn, after attacking with Quen, you may spend 1 magic point to attack with Quen 1 additional time. So, let's say, for example, Quen was rolling against this brute in this example. Obviously, I'm using my own units in all my examples. You wouldn't normally be attacking your own units, but yeah, just for illustrative purposes. So let's say Quen rolls 2 dice. She rolled 1 successful hit, 1 unsuccessful. So then, if you wanted to pay 1 magic out of your magic pile, she could attack that brute again. And she got 2 more hits. So then that would mean the brute would be dead because I rolled 1 successful and then 2 more successful. So that brute would now be dead. So basically, if you wanted to attack multiple times, that's when you would use Quen's Chain Lightning ability. All right, so those cards aside. Now we get on to the event cards. What I like about the Sunderved event cards are most of them are pretty straightforward, but you can still do somewhat complex things in them. So for this one, Torridon's Advance. When moving Torridon during the movement phase of this turn, you may move him up to 2 additional spaces. So this is an important card to use because, like I said, Torridon normally only moves 2 spaces each turn. So he would move 1, 2. But when you play Torridon's Advance during your event phase, play event card phase, step 3, if you play Torridon's Advance during that point of your event phase, now you can move him 4 spaces instead of 2. So one way you could use this card would be just to get to the other side of the board. So let's say, for example, Torridon was right here. He could move literally 4 spaces. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Basically, he could get to the other side of the board and basically make your enemy summoner really worry about what you're doing next, and basically scare him because he just showed up out of the middle of nowhere. Or also, my personal favorite for Torridon's Advance is to use this card. Remember, this Trample does not work on champions. For example, if I used it on 3, it's hard to orchestrate this, obviously. It doesn't happen that often. But let's say there were 3 enemy units in the way. If I played Torridon's Advance, then Torridon could go 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces, and each of those units would receive 1 wound. And obviously, you can go in a different order too. You could go 1, 2, 3, 4 that way. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. But Torridon's Advance is a really helpful card for that purpose. Obviously, you have to have Torridon on the board for Torridon's Advance to be have any usefulness. But that it would be one use for Torridon's Advance, and you only have one copy of this card, so use it wisely. Next up, we have Fallback. This one, choose a wall you control. At the end of your turn, you may place your summoner and up to 2 common units that you control adjacent to the chosen wall. You only have one copy of this card. This card's really important for this reason. For example, let's say your summoner and 2 common units that you have are on the other side of the board. Um, let's say, for example, you want them to get in a lot of attacks, but you also don't want to keep your summoner in a really risky position. So what can you do? You can play Fall Back during your event phase, then move all your characters, so you can move them forward, put them into really vulnerable positions, for example, and then they can do their attacks. And since you played Fall Back during your event phase, now you say, okay, I'm going to choose this wall back here. Now, at the end of your turn, after you finish your play event card phase, your movement phase, your attack phase, um, and your build magic phase. Now you can send your summoner and 2 common units, only commons, back to that wall that you originally specified. So Sunderved can go all the way back here, and you can bring these guys with him. So if you want to pull off a really big offensive attack, but then retreat to safety, fallback is really useful for that purpose. You only have one copy of that card, so use it wisely. Now, next card, Superior Planning. Search your draw or discard pile for a Sunderved event card, reveal the card, then place the card into your hand and shuffle your draw pile. Obviously, if you draw, let's say, for example, let's say you use Fallback and you put it in your discard pile, you can use Superior Planning to take Fallback out of your discard pile and put it back into your hand. So that's one excellent use of that. Also for Torridon's Advance, since you only have one copy of that too, that would be also a really good use of the card. And if you take a card out of your discard pile, you don't have to worry about reshuffling a draw pile because you didn't mess with it, obviously. So that's that. And so Superior Planning, you basically use that whenever you really need fallback, you really need Torridon's Advance right now. You can use Superior Planning to get that back into your hand. You have 3 copies of that, I believe. No, actually, there's 2. All right. Greater Command. This is basically Sunderved's ability of command, but in place of command, Sunderved gains the following ability until the end of this turn. Greater Command. When attacking with a common Mountain Vargath unit you control that is within 4 spaces of Sunderved, add 1 to that unit's attack value during the attack. So, instead of it just being within 2 spaces, Sunderved can affect people all the way 4 spaces away from him and through walls. That's another important thing. So basically, he's commanding them from a distance to attack the enemy summoner, enemy units, whatever you want to attack. So Greater Command, you have 2 copies of that one. And obviously, you can use Superior Plan to get this card back too. All of the cards I'm talking about right now are event cards. You can tell because Sunderved's picture is right here, and it has a name on the top left. All of these can be retrieved using Superior Planning. The only place you cannot retrieve them out of is your magic pile, though. Mm-hmm. Lastly, Muster. Place up to 2 common units you control adjacent to your summoner. So one useful application of Muster could be, let's say, for example, Sunderved is on your enemy's side of the board, and let's say, for example, he's all by himself because maybe they killed your common units and he doesn't have anybody around to help protect him. So If you played Muster during your event card phase, you can get two other units that you have on the board, let's say this warrior and this rusher, and you can put them adjacent to your summoner. So let's say here, and let's say stick the rusher here. Now you've got some backup. He's not all alone where he is right now, and yeah, that's a decent application of using muster to help your summoner when he's in trouble. Or, for example, let's say he was really getting pounded back here in the back. You could do the same thing and put two common units adjacent to your summoner to protect him. Let's say if he was hurt. All right. So those were all the cards in the Mountain Vargath basic Sunderved faction. Sunderved is the first summoner for the Mountain Vargath, and you can find him in the Summoner Wars Master Set. He's one of the 6 factions that come in the Master Set. I think that covered everything. Went over pretty much everything that was in that deck. You have multiple copies, obviously, of the different cards, except the ones I said you only had one copy of. Um, Obviously, you only have one copy of Sunderbed. And I think that was everything.
Also, you have a single copy of each champion, whereas the common units, there are several of each type of common unit in the deck.
Right. And so, yeah. All right. Let us know if you have any questions, if you think we left out anything, and we'll see you in the next faction video.
All right, thanks for watching.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.